I'll start with the first question about, deferral. So when we talk about deferral, students would always ask the first question is why, why application get deferred, and how much does this vary from school to school?
So this is a typical admission question in which the answer is, it depends. Meaning that there are lots of different schools and they may defer for a number of different reasons. But the most typical reason has to do with institutional priorities. What that means is every school has a list of things they want to be able to do, especially highly selective. They want to bring in smart, motivated people that are not only going to be academically successful, but also contribute to the life of the school. One of the ways they determine that is how to divide who gets in from where. In other words, many schools are trying to get people from all 50 United States and many different foreign countries. The hardest place to apply from to US schools is China, just because it's a huge country with lots of people who are incredibly well prepared. So schools are not reticent, but they're very careful about who they are going to offer admission to during early decision, and they may defer them because they want to see the overall applicant pool from a given country or even a given part of the country.
Thank you so much. So you mentioned about institutional priority. Could you elaborate more on that part? Like, it's more about academics or it's just something else?
Well, it's a little bit of everything, because some schools have a school of engineering, a school of architecture, a school of arts and sciences. So they need people for each of those schools. But they're also very different in terms of size. Architecture schools tend to be quite small. The arts and sciences tends to be the largest, engineering somewhere between those two. And then business schools, there are a lot of schools that have schools of business, and because business is the most popular major in the US right now, that has become probably more selective. But there are other ways they're trying to divide things up. They don't want to take too many people from a given city. They don't want everybody from Beijing or Shanghai. They don't want everyone in the US to be from New York or Chicago or Los Angeles. So they're looking at geographical, but they're also looking at schools. How many people from a given, let's say, key high school in China are applying to a school? And the smaller the school, the more competitive it will be among your fellow students.
Yeah, that's great. So when students, after they receive deferral notice, what can they do to potentially be admitted during the regular decision process?
So again, it depends. I don't know what a particular student has done unless I'm working with them. What have they done to already make themselves known to a school? In other words, have they visited? Have they taken tours? Have they taken virtual tours? Have they been in touch with current students or faculty? So there are many variables that go into it. For some, they don't know much about the school, so demonstrating interest is something that more and more schools are taking into account, and they're using sophisticated artificial intelligence to determine that. Now, the top tier Ivies may not do that, but it doesn't take very long till pretty much every other school is looking pretty significantly at demonstrated interest, and early decision is one of those. Duke takes half its class early, and so does University of Pennsylvania, and the admissions rate early is a lot higher than it is for regular decision.
So when it talks about demonstration of interest, when it comes to, getting themselves from the wait list, so what they can do is, say, attend the info session, talk with current students, maybe visit school if they can, to show more interest in their early decision schools.
And one of the other things I suggest is that they do some research in their area of interest. If they're interested in business, well, what kind of business? And if you know what kind of business, well, who is teaching there in that particular area of business? It could be anything from economic tariffs to platforms which most effectively market. So as students develop an interest and an understanding of what they're interested in, then the more they can demonstrate that they have familiarity with the program and familiarity with the faculty and also the kinds of groups that are there, because most of these schools offer opportunities for STEM people or liberal arts people or engineering people. And so having an awareness of how an education occurs, not just in a classroom, but outside, and how a student may contribute to that community.
Great, thank you so much. Then in terms of documents they submit, what kind of supplementary materials would you suggest them to submit if they want?
Well, first piece of advice is do not submit everything. If you've been cited by some club that barely exists for being a good member, that's not going to impress schools a lot. If you've received a significant honor or award or recognition for service or for athletics or pretty much anything, then you need to update them with that kind of information. But you have to learn to be selective about it, because admissions officers are always under a lot of stress to read a whole lot of applications in a limited period of time. So if you're just deluging them with everything you can possibly think of, that may in fact hurt you rather than help you.
Yeah, I do agree. If students ask me, maybe I would suggest, most recent transcript, if they get grades updated, maybe, additional activities or awards or, like internship, research, anything, hadn't shown on their application, they can update with the school as well. Or maybe, additional recommendation letter if that helps.
Well, additional recommendation letters, typically students have already submitted as many as they can, given the requirements of a school. So a recommendation letter that's submitted afterward will go to the Office of Admission, but you can't submit it as part of the common application, the general form. So some of those can make a difference, but the idea that you're just going to collect a whole bunch of letters, it's not the amount of letters you have, it's what they say about you and the details they provide.
Yes. Can they contact admission office or admission counselors if they can? How be the best practice for them to contact admission officers?
Well, again, it depends. A very large research university, you're probably not going to get a lot of personalized attention if you just contact their admission office, because they have 100,000 applications. So they can't devote significant amount of time. The smaller the school, the more likely you're going to be able to talk to at least a person, and if you're lucky, the person in charge of your region, whether it be a country or a part of the US, the West Coast, East Coast, North, South, whatever. But it really does depend in part on the size of the school and which school within a university you're applying to. It's more often easier to get a hold of someone in architecture, because not many people apply for it, than it is for the most popular majors like business.
So when we talk about the benefits of applying early, one of the benefits is they would know the result early, usually in mid-December. So after they get this result, can we consider that as a signal, regardless it's deferral or deny, but we're talking about deferral today. Should they adjust their early decision 2 and RD, like regular decision school list, based on the deferral result?
Well, again, I'm going to say, I'm sorry to say this, it depends, because if their school list is primarily top 25 schools, there's really not that much difference. I mean, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, MIT, Caltech, Stanford, they're in their own stratosphere. But once you get past a very small number of schools, there's not a lot of certainly numeric differences. And so if you've been deferred by one of those schools, I mean, if their acceptance rate is already 10% or 5%, you're probably not getting in. That's just how it is. So you may need to look further afield. Most people think it's the name of the school you go to, and to some degree that's true. But honestly, if you go someplace in the top 50 and you're a great student, then you're going to have opportunities to go to a top 10 school for graduate school, or to work with Google or Goldman Sachs or, Boston Consulting.
I agree. And my feeling is that if the ranking, because that's where students start, they always start with ranking.
And the parents too.
Yes. I'm afraid talking about parents, but yes, they all start with ranking. So my feeling is that if the rank is like within 5 or even within 10, those schools don't make much difference. Some students are very sensitive to ranking, like say this is rank number 19, whereas another school rank 20. They're same school. They don't make any difference. That said, if the student is deferred by, say, rank 15, that student might be denied by rank 20 as well. And as we all know, every year we see students, get denied by Cornell, then admitted by Columbia. It happens every year. So that prove your point as well. And by the way, I like you say it depends. It is that's a fact. It depends.
Yeah, if there were a formula, we'd be out of a job. Yes. I mean, that's each student is an individual, both to an admission office, but also that's what your job is as a student, is to be someone whose details are so recognizably different in some way. Could be through a recommendation, could be an activity, could be an essay, could be a combination of all of those things, or something I haven't mentioned. So, schools are looking for creating what they call a well-rounded class that more often is composed of pointy students.
Yes.
Meaning they have students in individual schools, individual majors, individual talents, like schools take music majors because they're very, very talented in music. They take athletes because they're very talented athletes. That's how admission works in the US. And a lot of parents and even teachers abroad, they don't understand that it's much more holistic. The UK is much more numbers driven, yes, but the US is much more holistic.
I agree. So my next question is, what's the difference between ED1 and ED2?
You want to guess what I'm going to say first?
It
depends. For example, if you, let's say you don't get in your first choice school for ED, but you're thinking about the University of Chicago, then you better apply ED2 there, because they hardly take anybody who's not a special interest of one kind or another in regular decision. So, they're pretty upfront about that. And a number of schools who have ED2, it's still a significant plus. Early action is not as much of a factor as early decision, but early action is also something. If you hear prior to January 1st about some of your early actions, that means you don't have to go there, but you have a school to go to. So I encourage people, if they can, to apply more realistically for early action, because now the stress is off. You have a good school to go to. Other people may have alternatives to that, but I just think it's so stressful now for students. And I just think knowing you have a good school to go to is, when you have that, it's a significant way of lessening stress in your life.
I agree. I feel bad for students nowadays. Then, in that case, are there certain schools where deferral are more likely to be admitted than others?
And again, that depends, because they don't know. They know if you apply early decision and are admitted, you have to go. But they don't know early action, how many are going to come, and they really don't know regular decision if they're going to come. So, students have to be aware that in a given year, something may happen, good or bad, that may affect, if crime goes up in a certain city, parents may say, we don't want you to go there. Okay, well, that's going to affect things for that particular campus. Or, they may have gotten 3 Nobel Prize winners that year. Well, now a lot of people would want to go there, because all of a sudden, they're in the headlines everywhere. So that's why this isn't, it's more of an art than a science. Predictions are notoriously wrong when it comes to who's going to win in this process. You and I have both seen enormously talented students not get into their first choice, and some people who are certainly very good, but we didn't think they were going to get into certain schools that they got into. And we were happy for them, but it was a bit of a surprise even to us.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Well, that's all my questions. But I'm going to add, following your comment, you pretty much, talk about it depends, for every question you say it depends. I really agree with you, because as you said, it's really the US application process is a true holistic evaluation. And as your remark in several articles about, subset 1, that's kind of one of the cores in terms of applying to top schools in the US, just to be a subgroup 1, to be unique. And when it comes to application review process, it's really case by case. There is no formula. I mean, if people tend to find easy answer, they tend to find formula. And a lot of consultants, I'm sure they try to simplify things as well, because it's easy to understand for students, parents. But truly, it's case by case. There's no formula. But just because of that, students from different backgrounds with different life experience would have equal opportunities to get into top schools. Maybe not equal, but different opportunities or different chances, and they are all might be able to get into top schools.
Well, there's something else I'm going to mention, which is it may in fact be harder to get in from certain cities than others, because there's so many people applying from Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, a number of tier 1 cities. But if you're from Yunnan, a school may say, well, we want somebody from Yunnan, in the same way that they say, we want someone from South Dakota. Just because they want someone whose experiences are fundamentally different in a country, and so they may have lower numbers, but they may stand out just because of their backgrounds.
Yeah, I agree. That's all for today's webinar. Before we wrap up, Park, do you have any comment you want to add?
Well, this is one of the great opportunities for students to look in the mirror and find out a lot about themselves. Because once you're out there in the world, it's sometimes hard to just step back from everything. But this is an exciting time. You should be not terrified of this, because if you've worked hard and done well, you're getting into good schools. And it may not be the list of 10 you have currently, but don't make this more stressful than it has to be. And I would include parents in that comment as well.
Yes, enjoying the process. Well, we hope this is helpful. And if you're applying to any school, we wish you the best luck with your application and hope you all receive good news very soon. Please subscribe to our newsletter to receive latest information and insights about college and graduate school application. Please visit our website at bostoned.org. It's BOSONED.org. And please also subscribe our YouTube channel for all the college and graduate school application information. Our goal is to help students get into top colleges and graduate schools in the US and the UK. Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you.